Hey, welcome back! In this video I'd like to look at some steps I need to take on this juniper to make sure it develops in a proper bonsai. In my garden I grow out lots of junipers of different size, different varieties and different development stages. Now I like to take cuttings, grow these whips out, wire them up and develop nice little bonsai out of them. And basically over time you just see these trees develop into nice trees. Now in a small pot like this they don't grow all that quickly, so they don't fatten up that quickly. Here I made a little mistake. In the middle of summer I decided to create a new top and it died off because the bark was very loose. So the work that I'm doing now is not something for the middle of summer, it is more for late summer, early fall when the heat is gone, it is more humid, temperatures cooling down, branches are still very pliable, they're not brittle yet for winter. You wire them up and as long as you don't have any frost for the next 4 or 6 weeks, you should be good to go. Right, which tree was I going to look at again? Alright, the big juniper, let's get that out. This juniper is one of a batch of junipers that came to me a few years ago when my club decided to buy a whole bunch of stock from field. So I at the time just planted it up, and if you look at it, one important thing that the grower did, it put a nice little bend in the lower trunk. Then it just let it grow in the field. I planted it up and for the next 2-3 years it was just sitting in my garden like this. Now you see these very big runners. It is full of health. But the bonsai is only going to be this size because the trunk is not all that fat. I'm not thinking about letting this grow out for another 10 years. So eventually all these long branches, they're going to be cut off. And what will I make my bonsai of? This tiny little branch here in the middle. Now this branch is starting to get a little bit weak. It sits here in the middle of the tree and it has not extended all that much. You see that the growing tips are still okay, but there are some dead tips here. Here's a little bit of extension, but nothing as enthusiastic as this whip that sits on the outside or on the other side of the tree, this one. So what am I going to do? Well, one of the challenges that this tree has is it is very full. So this sits between all my other junipers and all of these branches hang out on the outside. But here there's no air circulation and in fact it is a little bit shaded most of the day. You see here there's a nice curve going all the way into the back. And what I was thinking, and I hope you can see that this branch is going to be my new top branch. And if I flip the tree around, what you can tell is the main trunk really curves around completely and then continues into this back branch. But the little branch that I wanted to use is sitting here in the middle, this branch. And this is in a way hampering the development of this lower branch. Not just by the position, but also by the relative strength. Now if you look at this branch, look at how much this has grown and how many strong growing tips are in there. This is connected all the way at the base at that same branch. So the stronger this part gets, the less interesting this branch is for the tree to develop. Now if I remove all of this completely, this becomes all of a sudden the recipient of all the sap flow that's now going to this one. So that might enormously push this branch. Now normally I'd say let's air layer this off, but I don't have patience for that this time, so I'm just going to cut it off. Am I going to cut it off completely? No, I'm going to leave a little bit because I might want to keep some as a gin. Now all of a sudden this branch is relatively strong compared to that branch. But this also needs to go completely, just not with these scissors. Maybe I want to make a nice gin here, but everything else goes. And here there's a little one sitting in the inside of the bend. I'm also removing that because that's just competing. Now this creates a lot of light for this little whip to start growing again. All of these branches, of course, I'm not just going to toss away. Well, actually this I am going to toss away because this is weak. But if you look at this is a very strong whip, making ideal cuttings. And as this is Itoigava, I'm going to see whether I can still get these to root. It is after all the end of summer. Just need to protect it from the heat for the next couple of weeks. Don't think we will get any more heat. And let me plant these up. Whips like this are not interesting, right? These are just weak They have no extension growth except for a few little dots. This is not worth trying as a cutting. It is very important to straight away look into making the gin, because now the branch is nice, full of sap, and the bark is still fairly loose from the wood on the inside, and therefore you can still quite easily remove it. And also with the wood still full of sap, it is easy to pull fibers off. Now I've just squeezed it with my pliers. I'm going to cut the base of the bark so that I don't pull the bark off all the way. I really don't want this to start sprouting anymore. Yes, juniper can start sprouting again after severe cutback if it is healthy, but normally it doesn't. So just cutting all around, and I know I'm not going to get it through and through all around, so still I have to be a little bit gentle and careful. Then I can just lift the bark off. And once that is done, I can start pulling individual fibers. We can take, for instance, these concave cutters and just break the tip in a few pieces. And now with our pliers we have hold on these individual pieces. And we can just gently turn the pliers and this way pull fibers out, creating a more natural looking deadwood feature. I certainly am not an expert in creating deadwood. I find it very, very difficult to do. But one of the key things is to do it quite early on in the development, because that way the deadwood ages with the tree and will look more natural than something that's created fresh. The whole aim of this exercise is to make it look less contrived, less man-made. And this now just gets to age a little bit longer. Now if this is exposed to the weather, frost, sun, water, it will by itself start to decay, it will dry out, the wood will crack, and with that it will look a lot more natural than it does now. Now, and if we look here in this area, this of course is lower branching that I really would like to keep for this width to become my bonsai. That means that all the other lower branching that is on the sacrifices here on this side should go. That creates more space, more airflow, reduces the risk of infection by, for instance, spider mites in this inner core, but also will encourage more sunlight in the inside. So I'm just removing all this fluff that is growing here. For the sacrifice to work, it doesn't need to be there. And just create space. Now one could wonder whether I need this branch at all. This is just going to go. And I again need to decide, do I need a gin or not? I'm not going to decide now, so I'm just going to leave it as is. Then here further up, this branch is also interfering, so I'm cleaning this out. Now this has a lot more space to grow, and I could just add a gentle wire around it to give it a little bit of movement. And actually I should, because it is now getting to a thickness that if I don't do it now, I can't put any tight curves in it anymore. But before wiring this out, I would like to try and decide what am I going to do with these sacrifice branches once I'm done. Because normally you'd say a sacrifice branch is a sacrifice branch, and once the tree is developed enough, you cut them off, then their job is done, the thickening is gone, and you can just cut it off and throw it away. On the other hand, these branches are now already 4 or 5 years old. They might be on for another 2 or 3 years, so that makes them 7 or 8 years old once they're cut off. It's a bit of a shame to throw them away, because you could also develop them as a bonsai now, and then you have 7 or 8 year old bonsai trees once you cut them off. Actually, you wouldn't cut them off, you would just air lay them. So that also means that these I should now wire out as if they were young trees. If I do that, then I have 1, 2, 3, 8-year-old bonsai in 2 years' time when I lay them off, and this one as well. Now with all these branches cleaned out, it's a lot easier to see where the main branches are and to wire them. I'm going to use very thin, this is 2 millimeters, very cheap aluminium wire. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to take one of these branches, go down and up along the trunk into the next whip. And I'll do the same for this one here, up, and then in the other whip or in this one. And this way I might have 2 or 3 wires here on this main section of trunk, and then I'm going to try to bend it. I'm not sure whether I can still bend it, and then we'll see later on if I air layer here or there, or whether these whips individually are going to be taken off. I'll do the same here and here, and then I'll get to the main tree and I'll give that proper attention. I'm going to remove all these little branches and all the weak growth that have popped up here in all the crutches, and just leave single side branches and an open structure. And this is basically just a regular cleanup that you'd also do for a normal styling of a bonsai, right? This is nothing special. If it is special, if this is new and you would like me to do a video on how do you style a bonsai, particularly a juniper, and how do you prepare it for styling, let me know in the comments. And I suppose this is then also the time to ask you, if you have not subscribed to my channel yet and you do like my videos, maybe you want to subscribe so you get an alert whenever a new video is up. Would help me a lot. If you're already subscribed and you like this video in particular, why don't you share it on a social media platform? This would help me to reach new people that might like my video. Now I have wired out all the branches, and I've actually tried to create a little tree-like form here. I have put a tri-trunk in here, so a little raft-like. And here I've, well, basically just wired out just some shape, and that's the nice tree for later. And now let's look at this little whip that sits here. There's this nice curve going all the way around, and I think I want to first continue that, but then create interest by turning it in the other direction. Now keep in mind it is not midwinter, so the bark is not on all that strong. So I have to be a little bit gentle with my torque in the tree. I don't want this bark to slip. I know that in some of these branches I've probably already put too much movement for this time of the year, and I think that they might die off, or at least some of the side branches might die off. But for this, that would be really a shame if this would die. So I'm going very gentle, not trying to put in anything too drastic, but I do need to get in tight bends, otherwise it's just going to be a boring little tree. And as always, bends in all directions, right? So I think something like this. So it comes in, changes direction here, goes down, comes back up. And now this just needs to grow for another year or two. Get all these side branches also very, very long. These then go. Then these new sacrifices can grow out, and then the whole tree comes off. Now this pot is too small to encourage further development of this tree right now. But once these side branches are gone, this of course is again a very small tree. So I'm just going to focus on watering well, fertilizing plenty, and then maybe next fall I'll take these off. And who knows, maybe in springtime I'll change my mind and I'll plant this up properly. But yeah, this is pretty much the sort of work that I do on my junipers somewhere around September, October, when the temperatures are dropping, the nights are getting moist, and we're still quite away from real frost. You can also do this in the middle of winter, but then these branches become very brittle and they break a lot easier. So I really like this at the end of the growing season. In the middle of the growing season, slipping of the bark is in the risk. And what you then get is a died off top. I hope this helps. Drop me a comment down below whether this is also what you do or whether you have recommendations. I'm on purpose not trimming any of these tips because that will aid further in developing the tree. And with that, I think we are done here. This was Jelle, growing bonsai. See you next time.